Sirens wailed through the hallways of Manhattan General, warning every doctor on call that something life-threatening had just arrived. Nurses rushed past with carts, doors swung open, and voices cut through the noise. Incoming trauma. Mid-40 seconds male. Pressure dropping fast. Move. Dr. Sarah Ellis tightened the gloves on her hands as she pushed through the ER corridor. She had spent the last 14 hours operating, consulting, and stabilizing patients, yet her pace never slowed. When life hung in the balance, exhaustion didn't matter. She reached Trauma Bay 3 just as paramedics rolled in a stretcher soaked in deep red. Ruptured aortic aneurysm. One shouted, "Pulse weak, slipping." Sarah pulled the curtain aside, stepping into the blast of bright overhead lights. She grabbed the trauma gown, snapped it open, leaned over the patient. Her breath stopped. Her hand froze over his chest. Her eyes widened, as if struck by a memory she had buried so deeply no one dared touch it. Grant Holston. The name thundered inside her mind before her lips could form it. The man on the table, the one drowning in blood, the one seconds from death, was the same man who vanished from her world 19 years ago without a goodbye, without a reason, without a trace. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. For a moment, the room blurred. The beeping monitors, the panic, the rushing staff, everything slipped into the background, as if the world stopped for her alone. She whispered, barely audible, "Grant?" His face was pale, drained of life. Dark hair streaked with silver, a familiar line along his jaw. A face she once traced with quiet affection during long college nights. A voice snapped her back. "Dr. Ellis, we're losing him." She blinked hard. Her training surged forward. "Move, step back, charge to 200, Sarah commanded. But before her team could prepare the paddles, the monitor shrilled one solid, unforgiving tone. Flatline. Grant's body fell still. A deadly calm swept across the room. One nurse whispered, "We're too late." No, not him. Not today. Sarah's voice shook, not with fear, but with a storm she wasn't prepared to face. She grabbed the internal defibrillator paddles. Clear. They jolted his chest. His body lifted. No response. Charge again. Another shock. Nothing. For a split second, Sarah's mask slipped. She leaned close, staring at a face she once knew better than her own reflection, and choked out a breath she'd been holding for 19 long years. No, not again. Not like this. Her hand trembled, only once. Then she forced it steady. She refused to watch him slip away. Not after everything. Not after the promises, the heartbreak, the memories she tried so hard to bury. Internal massage, now. She opened the chest with practiced precision. Her gloved hands cradled his silent heart, squeezing rhythm into a body fighting to stay alive. "Come on, Grant," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You fought me when you left. Fight now. Fight while I'm here." A beat. Another. Another. The monitor flickered. A faint pulse returned. Weak. Fragile. But alive. Sarah exhaled shakily. Her team looked at her with awe. They had never seen her lose control, even for a second. But they didn't know who this man was. They didn't know what he meant to her. They didn't know that 19 years earlier he held her heart with a gentleness she thought she'd never feel again. Now he lay before her, broken and bleeding, and she was the only one who could pull him back from the edge. "Prep for emergency surgery. We're moving now," she commanded. As they rolled him out, her thoughts raced faster than the gurney wheels beneath her. Why him? Why today? Why after 19 years? She didn't have answers, but she had one truth. Grant Holston, the man she once loved so fiercely she thought time couldn't touch it, was dying in her hands, and she wasn't ready to lose him a second time. Sarah followed the surgical team down the hall, but her mind drifted into places she had spent years avoiding. Every step toward the operating room pulled memories from the corners of her heart, memories she once promised herself she'd let go of. The automatic doors slid shut behind the gurney, sealing them inside the prep area. As nurses rushed to attach lines and machines, Sarah stood still for one heartbeat longer than she should have. A voice inside her whispered, "How is it possible to hurt this much just by seeing someone again?" The room faded and the years folded backward in her mind. She was 19 again, walking across Columbia University's campus with a stack of textbooks pressed to her chest. Grant had caught up beside her, playfully bumping her shoulder. "Dr. Ellis in training," he teased. "You ever take a break?" She rolled her eyes. "Says the guy who lives in the business library like it pays rent." He grinned at her, wide, warm, and purely sincere. That smile had disarmed her every single time. They spent evenings studying together, side by side in wooden chairs, their whispers mixing with the rustle of pages. Breaks turned into jokes, jokes into long talks, and those talks into moments where the world outside didn't matter. There were nights they escaped to the small jazz spot just off 125th Street. Sarah would rest her head on his shoulder while soft music filled the air. Grant would lift her chin gently, kiss her with the kind of care that felt rare for their age, and whisper promises. "Whatever life throws at us, we'll face it together." She believed him without hesitation. He made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. She made him feel grounded in a way he didn't know he needed. They were opposites, Brooklyn warmth and Connecticut wealth, but that never mattered to them. What mattered was the way he looked at her, like she was the future he hadn't known he wanted. The harsh sound of monitors snapped her back. She blinked, steadying her breath, but the memories kept pulling. Another image flashed. Grant giving her his jacket during a storm on Broadway, even though he was soaked too. Grant holding her face gently during finals week when she spiraled under pressure. Grant telling her, "I love you," in the most unplanned, ordinary moment. Late night. Chinese takeout, books everywhere, the two of them laughing at absolutely nothing. He wasn't perfect, but he was hers, and she was his. Until he wasn't. Until the day everything shattered. She remembered the hospital call after his accident, the panic, the rush to reach him, the hope she clung to, then the cold voice that stopped her at the door. His mother, telling her she wasn't welcome, telling her Grant didn't remember her, telling her to leave him alone. She remembered walking away with tears burning her vision, her footsteps echoing through that sterile hallway. She had whispered one final promise to herself: if life ever brings him back, I hope I can survive it. Now here she was, standing over the broken body of the man who had once held her whole world in his hands. Her heart pounded painfully at the weight of it. She swallowed hard and whispered in her mind, "Have you ever loved someone so deeply that even years later, one look could break you all over again?" A nurse approached her. "Dr. Ellis, should we proceed?" Sarah nodded, pulling herself back to the present. "Let's move." But another memory flashed, slow, soft, and cruelly tender. Grant brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his forehead resting against hers, his voice low. "You're my always, Sarah." Her chest tightened painfully, because life didn't give her a chance to tell him she was carrying his child. Life didn't give her space to explain or fight or heal. Life only gave her silence. Now, suddenly, it was demanding she face the past she buried. As they wheeled Grant into the operating room, she held her breath. The sight of his lifeless body stirred a confession inside her she would never dare speak aloud. "I never stopped loving you. Not really. I just learned how to breathe around the emptiness you left." She steadied her voice, stepping into the lead surgeon's position. "Everyone ready?" she asked. But in her mind, she asked the question she had never resolved. How do you save the life of the man who shattered yours? Inside the operating room, the temperature seemed to drop. The surgical lights glowed harshly overhead as the team surrounded Grant's body. Machines hummed, monitors beeped, and every sound carried urgency. Sarah stood at the head of the table, breathing through the storm within her. "Let's begin," she said. The anesthesiologist confirmed vitals, what little remained of them. The scrub nurse handed Sarah the scalpel, and she made the incision with the steady precision of someone who had dedicated her entire life to saving others. But today wasn't like other days. Today The life on her table had once held her heart. As they reached the damaged aorta, the room shifted again, this time into panic. "Doctor, his pressure's dropping again." Sarah looked up sharply. The numbers on the screen plummeted. "We need more O negative. Now," she ordered. A nurse hurried to the cooler, yanked it open, and froze. Her face drained of color. "Dr. Ellis." "We're out." Sarah's heart thudded once, painfully. "Check the backup supply. We already used it in trauma earlier today. There's none left." Another nurse stepped forward. "Blood bank says the next units won't arrive for at least 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Grant didn't have 40 seconds. His blood pressure continued crashing, digits blinking red on the monitor. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as a horrifying truth settled in. Without immediate O negative, Grant would bleed out on her table. Her mind raced through every possibility. None existed. Except one. One she had never intended to face today. One she had kept locked behind years of silence. A name slipped out of her mouth before she could stop it. Isla. A nurse looked at her, confused. "Sorry, doctor." Sarah swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Isla, her daughter, 18. Healthy, brave, O negative. The one person in the hospital who could save this man's life. The same man who had unknowingly given her that child. Sarah's voice nearly broke, but she forced it steady. "Call the volunteer bay. My daughter is there." Her team exchanged startled glances. This wasn't standard protocol. Sarah didn't care. "Bring her to the donor room immediately. She's O negative." "Right away, doctor." The nurse sprinted out. Another voice chimed in hesitantly. "Is she aware she's donating for him?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "No, and she doesn't need to be. Just get her here." The door slammed behind the nurse, leaving a thick silence that pressed against Sarah's chest. Her hands moved on instinct, doing what needed to be done to keep Grant stable, but her mind was at war. How am I supposed to explain this? How do I tell her she's saving the man who disappeared from my life before she was born? How do I tell him she exists? Another sharp alarm pierced the room. Grant's vitals struggled again. "Doctor, we're losing him." A nurse cried. Sarah's composure cracked for a split second. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hold on, Grant, please, hold on." Her plea wasn't medical. It wasn't professional. It was personal in a way she didn't have the strength to hide. Meanwhile, down the hall, Ayla sat in the volunteer bay finishing paperwork when the door flew open. "Isla Ellis?" She looked up. "Yes? Your mother needs you in donor room too. It's urgent." Isla blinked. "Did something happen? Is she okay?" "It's not about her. She needs your blood type. Now." Isla stood immediately, fear and confusion flaring in her chest. "If she needs me, I'm coming." She followed the nurse quickly, unaware of the weight of the moment, unaware that each step brought her closer to the truth that had shaped her entire life. Back in the OR, the team scrambled to buy seconds. Seconds, that was all Grant had left. Sarah felt her breath catch as she watched his pulse flicker again. A nurse returned breathlessly through the side door. Isla is heading into the donation room now. Relief and terror hit Sarah at the same time. Good, but also, God, forgive me. She doesn't know. Her daughter didn't know she was saving her father. Sarah stared at Grant, the man who had never met the child he created. The man who stole her heart and whose absence nearly broke her. Her voice cracked as she whispered internally, "Why is life forcing this moment on us now?" Seconds later, her focus returned like a snap. Her tone became pure authority. "Prepare to infuse the new units as soon as they arrive. We keep him alive." She locked her attention on the failing heart in front of her. Her daughter's blood was about to become his lifeline. 2 lives intertwined for years without knowing it. 2 hearts beating because of one extraordinary young woman who had no idea. She was giving a part of herself to the man who once held her mother's world. That was the moment Sarah realized. Whether she was ready or not, The past had found her, and it wasn't letting go. The operating room had never felt so small. Machines beeped in strained rhythm. Gloved hands moved in practiced coordination. The air carried the heavy tension of a life still hanging by a thread. Sarah stood anchored at the table, her gaze fixed on the heart she refused to let fail. Every beat Grant's body managed felt fragile, unsteady, unpredictable. Minutes felt like a lifetime. A nurse whispered, "The first unit from Ayla's donation is ready." Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second. A single breath. A silent prayer no one heard. "Start the transfusion," she said. The nurse connected the line, and the first drops of Ayla's blood began streaming into Grant's veins, quiet, warm, and life-saving. Sarah's throat tightened. Her daughter's blood, flowing into the man who never knew she existed. For a moment, the world shrank to three people. Sarah, Grant, Ayla, past, present, and truth, converging in one impossible room. She steadied her breath as the monitor flickered. Grant's pressure inched upward, slow, tentative, but upward. Relief fought with fear inside her, refusing to let her feel one without the other. Her voice softened, not loud enough for anyone to hear, but honest enough that she couldn't deny it anymore. What happens when the truth you buried becomes the only thing keeping a man alive? Her hands did their work, while her mind pressed forward with questions she'd hidden for 18 years. Can you face someone who left you without meaning to, when he doesn't remember the promise he broke? She watched the numbers stabilize little by little. A part of her heart loosened. A different part twisted even tighter. Because this moment was no longer just medical. It was destiny circling back with a force she couldn't outrun. More blood flowed. Grant's pulse strengthened. Sarah felt something inside her shift, the quiet awareness that everything after this day would change. Ayla would have questions. Grant would wake. Secrets would surface. And Sarah. She wasn't sure whether she was ready to lose control of the life she had built. Her whisper trembled at the edges. Would you tell the man who broke you that he's the father of your child? The surgeon mask hid the tremor in her lips, but not the emotion in her eyes. No one in the room knew the truth. Only she did. And now fate was demanding answers. Answers she had avoided for nearly 2 decades. She steadied herself, lifted her chin, and continued working as the monitors slowly crawled back towards safer numbers. Grant's life was no longer slipping away, because Ayla had given him the strength to keep fighting. Sarah blinked hard, fighting the burn behind her eyes. Her daughter had unknowingly tied their lives together again. Her daughter had saved the man who once shattered her. Her daughter had reopened a story Sarah thought was closed forever. As the team stabilized Grant's condition, Sarah took a slow breath and spoke, not as a doctor. This time, but as the narrator of the moment, addressing the viewers drawn into her world. Before we go deeper, besties, please like this video and comment "Second Chances." It helps YouTube share this story with more hearts that need it. Her voice returned to command immediately after. Let's close him up. He's not in the clear yet. But something unspoken lingered in the room. A question that wouldn't leave her alone. What if saving him means reopening everything I tried so hard to forget? The operation wasn't just a fight for Grant's life. It was the beginning of a fight for truth, for healing, for a family that never got the chance to exist, and for the love that never truly died. The moment the doors to the operating room closed, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders with a pressure unlike anything she'd carried in years. She had performed hundreds of life-saving surgeries, faced every type of trauma imaginable, but nothing had prepared her for the shock of seeing Grant Holston on her table, fighting for his life. She snapped into command mode even as her mind churned beneath the surface. Clamp ready. Suction. I need clear access to the descending aorta, she ordered. Her voice was steady, but inside she was fighting memories she did not invite, memories she thought time had locked away. She remembered Grant's hand wrapped around hers during college winters, the warmth of his laugh, the way he used to talk about their future as if it were already written in stone. He used to tell her, Whatever we face it together. But today, she stood alone at his side, fighting for his heartbeat while he lay unconscious, unaware of the history vibrating beneath her skin. Pressure falling again. A nurse called out. Sarah focused sharply. I need the vascular clamp now. As she worked, her hands moved with the confidence of a surgeon who had spent years mastering her craft. The bleeding was aggressive. The aorta had torn badly. She guided her instruments with precision, each motion decisive, each decision urgent. But beneath the mask, behind the clinical focus, her heart thudded with a familiar ache. Why him? Why today? Why fate? She blinked it away and anchored herself in the reality of the moment. He needed her, not as the woman who loved him long ago, not as the one he lost without remembering, but as the surgeon who could keep him alive. She leaned in, calling for more retraction. Her gloves were soaked. Her breath was sharp. Her heartbeat was steady only because she forced it to be. Stay with me, Grant, she murmured quietly, barely audible. Not one person in the room questioned it. They knew her reputation. They knew her intensity. They didn't know the secret history threading her words with emotion she could not allow to break her concentration. The monitor beeped irregularly, threatening to dip again. Sarah squared her shoulders. She would not let him go. Not today. Downstairs, Isla sat in the donor room, arm extended, fingers curled anxiously as the nurse prepared the needle. Your mom said it's urgent, the nurse told her gently. You're helping save someone in critical condition. Isla nodded, pushing back a flutter of nerves. She had volunteered at the hospital for months, always eager to help where she could. But this was different. This was immediate, personal, and unknown. Is my mom all right? She asked. Yes, she's fine. Just needs your blood type for a patient. Isla exhaled, relieved. She trusted her mother completely, but she could sense an undercurrent of tension in the nurse's voice, something unspoken. As the blood filled the bag, Isla stared at the ceiling, her mind drifting. She wondered why her mother sounded so urgent this time. Sarah rarely asked anything of her during emergency shifts. She preferred Ayla stay out of trauma zones. But today she had insisted. Upstairs, Sarah's thoughts kept slipping back to her daughter. Ayla was strong, but she was still 18, still growing, still learning, still trusting her mother to guide her. A sharp mix of guilt and fear twisted in Sarah's stomach. Her daughter was donating blood for her own father. The truth Sarah had kept hidden for 18 years was now flowing through a tube into Grant's body. Her hands kept working, but her mind whispered, she deserves the truth. She deserves to know who he is, but not like this. Not today. When the intercom buzzed, a nurse entered the OR quietly. Dr. Ellis, your daughter's donation is complete. First unit will be here in 2 minutes. Sarah nodded without looking up. Good. Keep me updated. Her heart clenched. She was both doctor and mother today, and both roles demanded more from her than she felt ready to give. The first unit arrived just as Grant's vitals crashed violently for the second time. He's coding again, the anesthesiologist shouted. Sarah snapped her head up. Begin transfusion, push wide open. But even as the blood entered the line, Grant's heart seized. The monitor flattened. A single continuous tone sliced the room. Her chest tightened, not as a surgeon, but as a woman who once trusted this man with her entire heart. Prepare internal massage, she ordered. The team moved quickly. Sarah slid her hands inside the chest cavity, feeling the cold stillness of a heart that should have been beating. Come on, she whispered. Come back. She compressed gently, rhythmic, steady, coaxing life into stillness. Nothing. She pressed again. Nothing. The room held its breath. A third time. A flicker. The faintest contraction. A weak but present electrical signal shivered across the monitor. Again, she instructed. Another compression. Another tremor of life. The tone broke into uneven beeps. A pulse. Weak, but real. Her shoulders dropped as she exhaled shakily. Her hands had brought him back. Again. This time, the fight was fiercer. This time, the cost to her heart was deeper. She looked at his face briefly, just long enough to feel the weight of the man he once was, and the man he might still be if she could save him. "Stabilize. I'm closing," she announced. But inside, she whispered to herself, "Why do you still have this hold on me, even now?" Hours later, when the last stitch was placed and the final instrument counted, the room emptied slowly. Nurses left to update charts. Assistants wheeled out equipment. The anesthesiologist signed off. Sarah stood beside the bed as Grant was transferred to recovery. For the first time since the stretcher burst through the ER doors, silence filled the space. Sarah removed her gloves, dropping them into the bin with a soft crinkle. She approached him slowly, hesitantly, almost fearfully, as if getting too close would shatter the fragile barrier she had built around her heart. He looked older now, sharper lines around the eyes, silver woven into dark hair, but the shape of his face, the way his brow softened in rest. It was the same Grant she had loved, the same Grant she lost. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and touched his hand, not as a surgeon assessing circulation, not as a professional making notes, but as a woman who had carried unanswered questions for nearly 2 decades. Her thumb brushed over the back of his knuckles. "You almost died today," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "You almost left again." Before I even had a chance to ask why, a tear slipped down her cheek before she could catch it. "Why did fate bring you back? Why now, when I finally learned how to live without you?" She looked at him, searching his unconscious face for something. Recognition, apology, reason. But he remained still, and she remained alone with the storm of feelings she had buried for so long. Comment, "Love heals," if you've ever wished for a second chance. Sarah stepped back from his bedside, swallowing emotions she didn't have the luxury to sort through. She straightened her coat, wiped her cheek, and reminded herself she had more patience waiting, more decisions to make, more truths to confront. Her voice shifted into the soft narrator tone perfect for your channel. Besties. Before we continue, take a moment and comment "Love heals" if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. Your support helps this story reach more hearts. She turned toward the hallway, gathering the strength to face what came next. Because the past was no longer a memory. It was awake again, breathing, waiting, and she had no idea what the next heartbeat would bring. Soft beeps echoed through the ICU as morning light seeped through the blinds. Grant's eyelids fluttered, fighting through a haze of medication and pain. His chest felt heavy, stitched tight, but the ache behind his ribs wasn't just physical. It felt familiar, as though an old dream had followed him into consciousness. He inhaled slowly. A voice, steady, warm, and gentle, somehow lingered in his mind. He had heard it in the chaos before everything went dark. A voice urging him to hold on. A voice that cut through fear and silence. He tried to grasp the memory, but it slipped every time he reached for it. A nurse noticed movement and hurried out to alert the surgical team. Moments later, the door opened, and Sarah stepped inside quietly. She approached him the same way one might approach a fragile truth, carefully, respectfully, yet unable to stay away. When Grant's eyes opened fully, the first thing he saw was her silhouette. His vision shifted until her face sharpened into focus. He stared at her longer than he should have, searching for something he couldn't explain. "You..." His voice cracked, faint but intentional. "I know you..." Sarah kept her expression steady. "You just woke up. Take your time." He shook his head slightly, wincing at the pain. "No, I've heard your voice before. When everything was fading, I heard you. You were there." She swallowed, lifting a hand to check the monitors. "Yes. I was..." His gaze lingered on her eyes, deep brown, steady, familiar in a way he didn't understand. He whispered, almost questioning himself, "Your voice, it felt like something I once knew." Her breath hitched, but she didn't let it show. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, thick with unanswered questions. Grant frowned again, studying her. "I've seen you before, haven't I?" Sarah exhaled slowly. "Once," she said softly. "A long time ago." He blinked, confused yet drawn to her presence. The room faded for him. All he could feel was that there was something about this woman that his heart recognized before his mind did. Sarah pulled a chair next to his bed, unsure how to begin a conversation that had waited 19 years. But she knew she owed him honesty, at least the first layer of it. You and I. She paused, steadying her thoughts. We knew each other long before today. Grant's eyebrows knitted. Were we co-workers? Did we meet during a conference? Something in the corporate world? Sarah shook her head gently. No, nothing like that. We met in college. That single word, college, hit something inside him. A spark, a ripple. His eyes closed as images flickered through his mind like scattered photographs. A campus courtyard, books in his hands, laughing with someone, warmth in autumn air, a woman's fingers brushing his cheek. College, he murmured. There was someone. I remember little pieces. Sarah watched his struggle, her chest tightening. Yes, she whispered. That someone was me. Another flash, her smile under a street lamp, his hand intertwined with hers, the echo of her laughter inside a library. Grant opened his eyes, stunned by the fragments creeping in. Were we together? He asked. Sarah nodded. For a long time. We cared for each other deeply. You meant more to me than you know. His breath shook as he tried to reach for the scattered memories. He saw her face again, younger, brighter, leaning over textbooks with him. He felt the outline of a kiss. He sensed affection he couldn't place. I don't remember everything, he admitted. But something in me. It reacts when you speak. Sarah forced a soft smile despite the ache in her chest. I understand. Your accident took a lot from you. He swallowed, guilt stirring inside him even though he didn't yet know why. I'm sorry, he whispered, for forgetting, for losing whatever we had. It wasn't your fault, she said quickly. You didn't choose what happened. But she didn't tell him everything. Not yet. Their daughter, the years, the choices, the secrets. Those truths would break open more than he was ready to face in a hospital bed. Grant pressed a hand to his forehead as another rush of memories flickered, this time clearer. I remember walking with you. We were laughing, he said quietly, unsure of what was real and what his mind was piecing together. Sarah allowed the flashbacks to surface, though each one tugged painfully at her heart. Their story had been simple at first. Two students studying late in the library, two hearts aching for connection, long walks down Broadway after midnight, sometimes sharing a warm pretzel, sometimes just sharing silence. She remembered the nights they sat together on the campus steps after exams, leaning on each other as if the world outside could wait. But just as vivid were the moments with Vivian Halston, Grant's mother, who disapproved from the first moment she laid eyes on Sarah. Sarah remembered the cold smiles, the subtle comments, the unspoken judgment. Vivian's words were always polite on the surface, but the meaning behind them left Sarah feeling out of place in the polished world Grant came from. Grant had always taken her side. She doesn't understand us, he'd whispered one night while they stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. But I do. And I choose you. He had kissed her then, slow, certain, while the skyline glowed behind them. And then there were the promises. When I graduate and settle into my job, we'll make a home, he had said. It won't matter what anyone thinks. Sarah had believed every word. She held those promises close even after he moved for his first job, even after she learned about his accident, even after Vivian approached her with a decisive, unyielding message. He doesn't remember you. Don't complicate his recovery. Leave him be. That memory hit Sarah hardest now. She watched Grant try to piece together their past while she tried to steady her breath. He whispered, eyes closing again. I remember loving someone. I think that was you. Sarah's heart clenched. Yes, she said softly. We loved each other very much. Grant stared at her with a heaviness that didn't come from surgery or pain medication. It came from recognition of what he had lost. He looked around the sterile room, then back at her. I've built a life filled with work, meetings, travel, but something always felt missing, he admitted. Like there was a part of me that wasn't complete. Sarah remained silent, letting him speak. He swallowed, voice thick. When you talked just now, when you said we were together, something inside me reacted. Like a door cracked open. He studied her face, the quiet strength, the sorrow she tried to hide, the softness she still carried beneath her controlled exterior. Then, with a tremor of remorse, he whispered, "Did I hurt you?" Sarah felt the words sink deep. He wasn't asking as a man defending himself. He was asking as someone who sensed the truth even before hearing it. She met his eyes slowly. "Yes," she answered after a moment. "You did, not because you meant to, but because losing you changed everything I thought my future would be." Grant inhaled shakily, the truth landing harder than any surgical pain. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "for whatever part I played in that, even if I don't remember." Her throat tightened. He didn't remember, but she did. Every detail. When the nurse returned to adjust his fore, Sarah stood up, sensing it was time to step away before her emotions broke through her professional barrier. "I'll let you rest," she said, her voice steady even though her heart wasn't. Grant nodded weakly. "Will you come back?" She hesitated, long enough for the weight of the question to settle. "Yes," she finally said. "I will." She stepped toward the door, but paused with her hand on the frame. Her chest felt tight, her thoughts spiraling between past and present. She had told him part of the truth, but the rest, the truth about Isla, the daughter who saved his life, that revelation would reshape everything they had ever been.